Hey guys, Shane here. Welcome to this third and final part of how to build a scale model. So in this beginner series we've already covered the construction, painting, and now we're moving on to the weathering to get an end finish similar to what you see here. So I'm going to take you through step by step how I got to this type of finish and explain to you my train of thought, the various type of tools and techniques I used to get this end result. So we're going to be focusing a lot with oil paints. So in this case we're using some artist oils, and we're going to be using titanium white, yellow ochre, and then a colour from the 502 Octilong range, which is their shadow brown. You could use like a lamp black or a raw or burnt umber for this too if you really wanted to. And then to mix and tin all this together, we're going to be using artist white spirit. It's very important that we use either model making solvents such as turpentine or artist white spirit. Don't use stuff you buy in a DIY shop. And also we're going to be using a various amount of brushes. Very important that they're soft and at least 2 wide bristle brushes. So first things first, we're going to start adding scratches to our model before we start applying our oils. So we're going to go back to our sand yellow that we used for the camouflage scheme, as well as taking some German camo black brown, both from Vallejo. So I'm going to start taking our camo, or should I say our sand yellow, should I say, and I'm going to start focusing these scratches onto the areas that we've sprayed the green camouflage. And this is to represent the camo that's been oversprayed the original colour, flaking away and showing the sand yellow underneath. I'm using a very thin brush for this. This is a 00 fine bristle brush, and as you can see it's quite a long bristle brush too, and I'm focusing on areas I'd feel that would get the most wear and tear, where that be areas of high traffic from the crew or parts that would be exposed to the elements more than others. I'm keeping the paint relatively thin. I don't want too much on my brush, and I'm just slowly dabbing it in. And as you kind of see, I kind of do it in a kind of a pointed motion. I'm not trying to paint one line at a time. So I just kind of jab into the plastic, and it gives me a very realistic effect. Now we're going to spend quite a bit of time doing the scratches on this Steyr model. And the reason for it is if you take your time with this, you can get a very nice end result. We do not want to rush this. Now start working on the fenders. Again, this area would take a lot of scratching up. And then we're coming back to the doors. Again, areas where the crew's hands would be, around the hinges, and any other points of friction you can think of. You can go as mad with this as you like, or as subtle. I'd always try to say go subtle, so I put too much paint here, and I immediately just wipe it off with my finger, and then I try again with a little less paint on my brush. So don't put too much paint on the brush, or you will kind of make it look unrealistic. I'd always say when it comes to doing scratches is less is more. And then for the areas that are sand yellow, we're going to take some German camo black brown, again from Vallejo. And I'm going to take some sponge, which is just a piece of packing sponge that we get sometimes in our model kits or wargaming blisters. I'm going to tear off a piece, try to get a jagged edge, and I'm just going to affix it to my tweezers. So you can see the way I'm going to use the jagged edge to create some very heavy chipping. Now we don't want too much paint on the sponge, and also make sure that we don't water down the paint in any way. We want this directly out of the bottle. I would not recommend using Model Air for this. It's just too thin and it kind of goes everywhere. We want a slightly thicker paint. So Model Colour out of the bottle is perfect for this. And you can see I'm just randomly jabbing it down. Again, I'm focusing on areas such as the feet welds for the driver and the front passenger, where their feet and boots would wear down the paint. Now I'm aware that these boxes here are actually made out of wood on the real vehicle, but I'm just going to paint them in on this camo black brown. I'm not going to bother to put a wood effect because we're going to have 2 seats sitting on top of it. You're not going to be able to see it. I'm just slowly working it up, and I'm just kind of thinking about where the paint would wear down. And again, here where the passenger compartment is. So there'll be a lot of high traffic on this floor. Now, I understand it looks very stark right now. However, when we start doing our oil weathering, we're going to tone all this right back down and also blend it all together. I'm going to focus in on some of the fenders. And I'm just really kind of focusing on the sharp edges, because these will be the areas that would receive the most wear and tear. Now you can see I kind of put a little bit too much in the middle of that chip, and I immediately tried to blend it out and weather out the other sides just to kind of make it look a bit more natural. This is a step I really recommend that you don't rush, and you just take your time. Even do it over a session or two and slowly build up your chips. You can go as minute and as subtle with your chipping, or as heavy. If you're going to go heavy, I would recommend that you slowly build it up and just don't attack it too much with a sponge. The sponge is only good with sharp edges and corners like I'm doing here with that wheel well. I wouldn't really recommend using the sponge for flat surfaces. It's a technique that I only kind of use now for doing sharp edges. It works very well for that. For flat edges, I recommend just using your paintbrush and manually painting it in. I was working on the bumper. I'm going to quite heavily weather the jerry can rack here, so I'm going to really kind of strip back the colour with the German camo black brown here, as that would receive a lot of wear and tear from removing jerry cans and what have you. I'm also going to gently push into some of the flat surfaces. It is always a little bit risky with the sponge. Sometimes you can put down too much on a flat surface, but if you very gently press it in using one of the jagged edges, so only a small amount of paint transfers, you can get away with it. Really focusing into various hinges and what have you. Now to add some more of the bare metal to break up the German camo black brown, we're going to take some gunmetal and we're going to paint that into the center of the areas that we blotched in, just to add a bit more depth and a bit more interest to it. It just helps a viewer understand that's actually a chip and not a blemish or a camouflage patch. I'm just going to do exactly the same. I'm going to basically paint this colour into the centre and leave the camo black brown in the edges, just to act as a border or a frame, if you will. I'm not going to put any of the metal colour on the two raised boxes for the seats, because like I said, they're made out of wood, so naturally we won't do that. It'd be incorrect. And we can see just immediately how it gives us a bit more 3D depth to our model. And I'm also going to pick some of the leading edges to edge highlight with our gunmetal. And I'm just using the edge of my brush and I'm just running it along the flat edge of the area we're painting. It's as simple as that. And we don't want to go too crazy with this colour, but just slowly build it up in areas we think it would be necessary to do so. And I'm going to paint it into this area that I very heavily weathered and chipped, so I want to have like the bare metal visible. I just edge that in. So as you can see, doing manual chipping does take some time. However, you do get a very good result. You just have to be a little bit patient with yourself. Take plenty of breaks, maybe have another project on the go at the same time. Try not to rush this. I find when you rush this, and we can all be guilty of this, sometimes we get a bit excited or we get impatient with ourselves and we want to get on to the next part. But if we take our time, the result will really stand to you and you'll be very happy with it. So once all our chipping has been allowed to dry, now it's time to start adding some of our oils. So I'm going to take some of our oils. I've also added some burnt umber to this, and it's very important that we agitate the tubes just to make sure that the pigment and the oil is mixing together. So I'm just going to basically squeeze the tubes with the cap still on, of course, and just mix the pigment and oil together. And then for a palette, I'm just going to take a scrap piece of cardboard, and I'm just going to lay down some dollops of oil. You can use as many colours as you wish. I'd always recommend keeping an eye out in your local art shop for sales regarding oil sets. There are model making oils such as 502 or Optilon, should I say. Also Meg and Wilder have their own model making oils too. Both are equally valid, whatever you get your hands on really. And now I've allowed our oils to sit on that palette for a couple of hours, and you can see that the oil has been dragged out by the cardboard. And now we're going to take some of our artist's white spirit, which is going to be our mixing agent. We don't want too much of this, so I just pour a bit into the cap, and I make sure I keep the bottle far away so I don't accidentally knock it over. And then to apply it, I'm just going to use a sharpened cocktail stick and then a flat soft brush to apply and prepare the surface with a tiny amount of white spirit. I don't want to drown the surface in white spirit, just moisten it ever so slightly. Now we're going to take our titanium white, and I'm going to start doing small dots on the vertical surfaces. So this is known as a dot filter. Now if you've never used one before, I really recommend you try it. It's a very simple technique. It does frighten a lot of people at first because you're putting dots of oil onto your model and it looks like a hot mess, but once you blend it back you get a lovely result. I'm also going to take some of our yellow ochre and start tapping that in. You could also use a paintbrush for this if you want, and I prefer to do this in sections. I don't want to do the entire side in one go, so I'll do one little section, do that, and then I'll work back. I'm going to take a clean brush which has been slightly moistened in white spirit. I'm going to start pulling in one direction, so I'm going to start pulling down on the dots, and as you can see I start getting streaks. Now do not panic with this, it looks very intense and very ugly right now, but we keep cleaning our brush off and we keep just blending it back, just pulling in one direction and one direction only, and just keep cleaning your brush. And you can see the more I work it, the more subtle it becomes and the more I can see the paint underneath it. You just have to be a bit patient and don't panic. And once I'm happy with that, I will prepare the other side with a clean brush again. So I have two brushes for this. I have one brush for doing the streaking and one brush for doing the preparatory work by laying down our little bit of white spirit. So again I'm just using our yellow ochre and our titanium white, and I might put a little bit of raw umber here as well just to break it up a little bit. Again, the colours you want are kind of has to be more so in the type of environment. This is a desert vehicle, so we're not going to get a massive amount of rust, and even then, even if there is a lot of rust, I find in scale it can be a bit too overpowering. I think a lot of modelers sometimes go a bit too overboard with rust, so I'm going to try to stay away from that, and I want to go for more like a sun faded or bleached look. And once again, with our clean brush, I'm just going to start pulling in one direction, and with each pull you can see this gets that little bit more subtle and more blended. And the more we work it, the more visible the streaking becomes. Now it is visible to the eye, but so subtle so it looks very realistic. So you can see how immediately it's after changing the hue of the plastic, and if you're not happy with the end result, you can keep working it back until it almost disappears. It's really up to you how intense you want it. And you can also experiment with different colours if you wish. There are such model making oils out there that will be called like faded sand and what have you, that will be very easy to navigate, if you will, so you know which colours to use and what are relevant to you. Or you can just do, I always find the three best ones were always sap green, titanium white and yellow ochre. And I'm not using really sap green on this, I just don't think it'd work. But I use for a lot of my Sherman and Allied bills, I use a lot of sap green. And And same as before, I've prepared our surface by moistening it again in a little bit of white spirit. And I'm just using our applicator here, and I'm just putting down a few different dots. So using our yellow ochre, titanium white, and a little bit of raw umber in places. I'm not putting too much of the raw umber down, mind you, very little of it. And then with a clean, moist brush, I'll just begin to pull that oil paint in one direction, and once again we get our streaks. I find this way is the best way to add like a wash to your vehicles. I don't like doing sludge washes. In very rare situations I'll ever use it, and you will see it in this build when I use a full wash over a surface. I just find when you put like a clay wash over a tank, it looks just like that, just like you just covered it in a wash. And it really doesn't work with the vehicle, I find. A lot of people think this is some type of ancient Chinese technique. It's not. It's very simple. You just have to kind of give yourself a chance to work with it. It's very simple to do. Now I'm going to do some stuff on the horizontal surfaces, and it's going to be very much the same as doing dots, but I'm doing much heavier dots here. And we're going to blend this in more as like an oil filter or an oil blended filter. And again, I'm going to take our clean brush, which has been moistened in white spirits, and I'm going to start blending this in a slightly circular motion. I'm not so much looking for streaking here, I'm more looking for like a faded effect. Now you can see it's very stark, so I'm going to keep coming back and cleaning off my brush and keep blending this back until it's almost gone. A layer like this and it's suddenly after changing and becoming very messy, do not panic. Just keep working it back. Don't resist the urge not to make the model swim in white spirit, just a small amount at a time, and just keep working it back. You need to be a little bit patient with oils, but they will work with you, and as you can see, with a few minutes of work, it's totally after being worked back to a very subtle layer. I'll do the same on the bonnet. And it's just a very simple way of getting a kind of a modulated effect. Oils are a very useful tool here for the model maker. Once we blend the back, we get a very nice faded effect. And it also blends all our chips together as well into one uniform surface. So for doing the fenders, we're going to try something a little bit different. We're actually going to put some oil paint directly from our palette onto it. So we're just going to take some yellow ochre, and I'm just going to take a small amount just from the edge of the dollop. I don't want to have a load of it on my brush, just a small amount. And we're actually going to paint it on to our forward fenders. This is another technique that you can experiment with, both work just fine. The camera doesn't really want to pick it up, but you can kind of see the slight colour change, especially with the sand areas. You can see it kind of go a bit more kind of tannish, if you will. And once we're happy with our oil filters, now it's time to add our pin wash. So before we do that, we have to protect the oil layer that we've done already. So I'm going to actually give the model a gloss coat once again. So it's important that we do this, or we'll run the risk of activating the oil layer underneath when we come to do a new one. So we put another layer of white spirits for more oils, we could activate the layer underneath it and ruin our model. So I'm just actually going to seal this in with some gloss varnish. So once our gloss coat has been allowed to completely dry, we're going to take some of our Opti-Long Shadow Brown and we're going to make a wash out of it. So it's quite easy to make a wash out of an oil paint. So we want to really be mixing about 80% thinner or 70% thinner to either 20 or 30% pigment or oil colour in this case. So I put a very healthy amount of white spirit into a bottle cap. I use these for very simple disposable little palettes. And exactly the same as before, we're going to prepare our surface once again with a little bit of white spirit just to break the surface tension of the plastic and allow the capillary action. And what we're going to do with this panel line is we're going to, as the name might suggest, we're going to put this wash into any of the panels on the model just to break it up and to add any definition and a sense of 3D. Now it might be a little bit thick in places like here as I try to etch it around this hinge here. However, I could come back with a clean brush moistened in some white spirits and clean that right up. So I'm going to focus this on any of the panel lines, any raised details that have a lip or an edge, or any sunken details. And what this is going to do is going to frame those details, outline them, and just give them a sense of depth. It's a very simple technique, but when this, as you will see in a few moments, it makes a massive difference to your model. It does take a little bit of time to build this up, as you have to go manually around and use the capillary action of the joint to pull your wash in. However, the effect is well worth that effort. So you can see me just slowly just tapping around the edges and allowing the capillary action to pull the wash in. And if it's messy, we can always come back with a clean brush and clean it and tidy up any areas we don't like. It's as simple as that. Oil is a very forgiving substance. You just have to work with it the correct way. And again, using the solvents have to be either from a model company or from an artist's supply. Do not use white spirit or turpentine that you find from a DIY shop. That is industrial grade white spirit or solvent. It will eat into the model. I've done it before and I've gotten away with it, but there's been other times it's eaten straight through my gloss coats. So you might have to pay an extra couple of euros more for an artist or a model making white spirit. However, it is a much better and safer option. There's also a good way of highlighting details like rivets, so just like tapping into these two bolt heads here, as well as the struts for the top cover, just to make them pop out a little bit and give them a small amount of detail, and just again draw a bit of interest to them, a bit of depth. And also kind of gives your model a bit of a grimy appearance too. And after all, these are fighting machines, and that's the way it should look, at least in my opinion. I was working on the rear of the vehicle, on the various hinges and handles. It's a little bit hard to see here, but you can kind of see like how the detail that was hidden immediately pops out once it's been outlined in the shadow brown wash. This can be a very intensive step, but just like the previous layer, if you take your time and allow yourself a bit of time to build up these layers, you can get a very nice effect. You just have to be a bit patient. So anytime I get an area I don't like or there's a bit too much wash, I just clean off my brush and use my cleaned or dried off brush as a sponge to dry up any area I don't like. As long as you do it before it dries, you can do little tricks like that. So you can see how the panel wash has made certain details pop. I'm also going to use this as a way to add a bit of definition to our tires, or should I say our wheel hubs. I'm just going to work it into the various bolts and other recessed details. And I'm going to do this for all the wheels. And it's just a very simple way of adding a bit of definition and a bit of interest to an otherwise flat looking part or component of a model. It's also a very good way of simulating grit and oil stains as well on hubcaps and what have you. So, as I was saying, I tend not to add sludge washes, as they're known as sometimes, to overall models, but there are places I will add. Like this, here for example, I'm going to apply a pretty heavy wash to the fighting compartment of the truck, just to add a bit of grime and a bit of detail, because there is like an embossed effect on this interior. Before this dries, we're going to wipe away the excess, so we're just going to be left with a bit of residue, just to give us a bit of dirt and a bit of grime before we start adding our sand and dust layers to give it a North Africa appearance. So I'm going to take a bit of kitchen roll here and wipe it away. I did make a mistake here. I really should have dabbed it out rather than try to wipe it away, because of the embossed texture actually started to peel off lint and stick it to the model. So I should have really just used either an actual piece of cloth or just dabbed it out. I kind of realised this halfway through and actually began to dab it away. But it gives us a very nice grimy effect. And it's not only really for jobs like this I'll actually apply a sludge wash. To a vehicle's body, never. I really would dissuade people from doing it. Because you can do a lot with this type of technique. There we have our kind of grimy interior. I'm also going to apply it to the undercarriage, because I'm not going to really focus too much on it, but I want to make it look a bit grimy, so at least it looks like it's been given some attention. So I'm just going to really apply it heavy and wipe it away then and leave it in the recesses basically. And you're not going to really see any of this because, well, you're not going to pick up my model and swing it around, that's not how we display them. So it's just there just to kind of cover our arses, as it were. Might be a little bit cheating, but that's just how I build, It's different if it's a commission piece, then you put every element of detail into it you can. But when you're doing it for yourself, different things are acceptable to different people. And this is how I do my undercarriages and the bottoms of my tanks, I'm never going to see them, so I'm not going to waste my own materials on them. And this is just a quick way at least giving them some effect. And again, I'm going to take our piece of kitchen roll and just stab it away, so we just have the residue left, and it gives us a very grimy and greasy appearance, and actually works quite well for an undercarriage. And then with what's left of our wash, we're going to go back and we're going to do some panel lines in the interior of the vehicle. Now, I'm sorry this is a little bit hard to see. The camera had a hard time white balancing this, but it's exactly the same as we did it on the exterior of the vehicle. Just focusing on the various panel lines and raised and sunken details, just to give them a little bit of definition and a little bit of interest. And with that, our oil layering is complete. So now we're moving on to adding our dust and sand, and for that we're going to take a mixture of Vallejo Model Color Iraqi sand and some airbrush thinner. I'm going to tin it down quite heavily, keep my air pressure about 15 psi, and basically have mostly air and a tiny amount of paint coming out of my brush. And I'm going to focus this colour really on the lower part of the vehicle. And this is going to give us a really dusty and kind of worn appearance. I find when people do dust with pigment especially, it can look very overpowering. With this, keep it subtle and slowly build it up to a point where you're happy with. I find using an airbrush for this is the best bet. I find with pigments it's just a little bit too intense for me, whereas I find with paint it's a bit more subtle. So you kind of see I'm kind of reworking it on the back here because that's where most of the dust will be kicked up. And I'm also applying it a little bit to the tarp just to add a bit of definition and a bit of interest to the tarp. I'm just slowly building it up and really focusing on the bottom of the hull. And the same with the interior, just focusing near the bottom where the ships will be bringing dust in, as well as the floor of the infantry compartment. We don't need a lot of paint to do this, just a small amount. I get quite a nice effect. We don't want to completely lose all the detail and work that we've done underneath this, so we don't want to flood the model with sand color paint. And then to do some sand effects on the tires is actually very simple. So we just spray it on, and while the paint is still wet, we just wipe it away, and it leaves the dust really in the recesses and in the treads, just like it would be in real life. It's a very simple way of doing it, and the same for the actual treads themselves. So spray it on light, just a very light coat, thin coat, and then wipe it away. And there we have some very simple and realistic dust effects. Also, to add some dust to our windshields, I've taken some tammy tape and I've basically cut two half ellipses, and that's going to represent the wipers, and we're just going to spray a little bit of our Iraqi sand onto our cellophane panes here for our windscreens. Very simple technique, it works pretty well. Now I got a bit of spitting when I did it, so I'm actually going to take a cotton bud just to blend that in a bit. I went in a bit too heavy, so I'm going to wipe some of the excess away. I'm going to take some Agrax Earthshade and that's going to apply some wash to the back of the seats. It's just something I decided to do near the end, just to add a bit of interest. You could use your shadow brown wash for this too if you wanted. This is an acrylic based wash in this case. And that's going to just apply this to the back of the seats, because it looked a bit plain and flat, and this just helps give them a bit of depth and break them up. And with that, it's time to start assembling our model. So again, being very careful not to damage or break or snap anything off. It's very simple, easy to do it at this point. So take your time and be conscious where your fingers are at. And once we're done, we'll start adding our final detailing to the model. So first things first, I'm going to apply a matte coat to our model just to take down the shine. Now I made a mistake here, and I'm sure most of you immediately realise I installed the glass for the windshields, and I really shouldn't have done that until after I had matte coated the model. I had to come back in with a cotton bud and some airbrush cleaner and clean away and polish away the varnish before it dried. So that was a little bit of an oversight on my part. However, it's not like the end of the world if you did do it accidentally. It just makes the glass look frosted. can work if you're doing something like a winter scene or something like that. And in this case I'm just using Vallejo matte varnish. And this should knock back the shine and make everything look much more matte and realistic. So the final detail I'm going to do is going to be with a Tamiya weathering master set, in this case set A. And I'm just going to add some of their light sand to some of the seat covers, just to add a little bit of interest to them, because they looked a bit plain and boring. So I'm just going to help break that up. And I'm just going to apply it straight out of the set, just using the applicator. What I normally do is I normally just like dip the applicator tip in a little bit of water just to allow it to pick up more pigment, and just gently tap it down, and it gives us a very nice effect, kind of like a dusty kind of material effect. And any of you watch my painting tutorials know that I'm a very big fan of these Tamiya weathering sets for my figures or anything that's made out of material or fabric. It works very well. I'm also going to put a little bit onto the windows, just a small amount, just to blend it all together. And once that's done, our model is complete. I'm just going to apply a little bit here to the floor, not a lot. And you can add as much or as little of this as you want. And you can also wipe it away if you don't like it. And with that, our model is totally done, and we have our Africa Core vehicle ready to go into the desert. So I really hope you liked this tutorial series, guys, and hopefully you might join me in the future for some more advanced and intermediate type of tutorials on vehicles. I have been Shane, thank you so much for watching, stay safe, happy modelling, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.